Hello, I'm the Trinity again, and sometimes I like to talk about small reality TV moments that I find funny, amusing, or otherwise intriguing. I'm interested in those moments or players that I find unique, that, for some silly reason, have become ingrained into my mind as memorable parts in all of my years of watching reality television. Storylines that eventually became pillars on the evolution of some of these shows and the genre as a whole, and which I'd like to explore here in what I call my Reality Glossary, the book that details the most notable moments in reality TV history. And usually this glossary would be full of the big moments that everyone knows about, but today I wanna go a little bit lighter, just a small tale that I always found particularly funny. Let me tell you about how two mothers completely changed the way The Amazing Race is played today. This is the rule of the Bowling Moms. You know what's funny? When talking about hugely influential players in reality competitions, people think about the Dr. Wills and the Richard Hatches, the Daniel Reyes and the Boston Robs, etc, etc. It's understandable. They're hugely charismatic players that pop on the screen. So, it's always been humorous to me how the team that ignited a complete change in The Amazing Races format were a pair of nice, cute, middle-aged ladies that just wanted to have fun.
We are your bowling team, the Bowling Moms from Palmdale.
These are Linda and Karen, two good friends that love to go bowling and that went on the race to prove that they could beat the odds as a pair of old mothers and match up to the younger, fitter people. Basically, they were cast as fodder. Okay. I know The Amazing Race likes to market itself as a show where anything could happen, anyone could win it, but 9 times out of 10, the winners look exactly how you think Amazing Race winners would look like.
I am pleased to tell you that you have won the $1 million.
Very fit, strong, usually thin, in their 20s to 30s. There have been a couple of surprising outcomes, but they were very rare, and they especially were in the very first seasons. If you don't believe me, let's take a look at the winners up to this point. A strong man, a strong man, a strong man, a strong man. Wait, we have a girl here. A girl who wanted to quit and had to be carried by his best friend. A strong man, and a strong man. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of variety. But even besides the main advantage, the archetype of two older moms also didn't have a good track record. One of the things I love the most about early Amazing Race is that they cast teams that were so different in ages and sizes and occupations, even when they didn't look especially athletic. So the archetype of two older moms had actually existed since the very first season with Pat and Brenda, and that team exceeded expectations. They were eliminated third and not first.
Brenda and Patricia, I'm sorry to tell you that you've both been eliminated.
And the next season followed them up with the Gutsy Grannies, who were anything but gutsy, and they went home third too. And seasons 3 and 4 had mother teams, but they were much younger and also didn't do very well, so Linda and Karen didn't have the highest expectations to say. However, The Amazing Race 5 wasn't like any other season. It had a little something. It hated men. You see, all previous seasons featured no less than 3 all-men teams in their casting, but TAR 5 only had 1, and it was these guys. And they broke their knees halfway through, so if there was any race where any team could really take it, it was this one. Instead of competing against a bunch of buff dudes, Linda and Karen had to compete against an old man and his daughter, a pair of old widows, a team with a short woman, a pair of young bumbling twins, a toxic relationship. This is not to discredit anyone here, but to show you that the race was as open as it had ever been at that point. If only it weren't for the devil.
I'm just a very intense person, and I think that I could possibly be the most intense person that's ever run this race.
We never left him, sorry. Bad. Very bad. You can take $50 or you can take nothing.
Yes, The hopeful moms were unlucky enough to be racing against one of the most intensely competitive players to ever appear on this show. We're talking about Colin Gwynn. He had a temper, he had a huge determination, he had unreal skills, he broke the race, he raced so fast, he thought strategically about the game like no one ever had before. He was, to say, the ultimate boss of the Amazing Race franchise. Along with Chrissy, of course. So the moms wouldn't have an easy hill to climb if they wanted to make it far. Hey, if everything went right, maybe they could go up to 6th, but the final legs are usually reserved for teams that are on top of their game, physically and mentally. And there's always that one challenge that's all about strength and endurance, so they would have to overcome a lot if they wanted to be Amazing Race winners. The question is, was anyone really expecting winners out of them? Or even contenders? I don't think so. When people see a team like this, they're always thinking like, well, I hope they have a lot of fun along the way. And if they go even decently far, they call that a win. So coming into a new season, I guess many people hope that the Bowling Moms will be a fun comic relief for a short while, until their inevitable elimination. And so, with all these low expectations, when the Amazing Race 5 started, Linda and Karen completely shocked everyone by being alright. Well, to be fair, they did very well on the first leg, coming in 3rd place, but after that high, it pretty much goes how many people expected it to go. Through legs 2 to 4, the moms kept going down in the rankings, struggling with heights and with flights and even kind of getting into a fight with another team. But as the race went on, the moms started to struggle having to come from the back of the pack when they reached Egypt. At some point during their visit to Cairo, Linda twisted her ankle, and they found themselves in a race for last against the twins, where the moms would finally lose the race in 7th place, just like how many thought would happen.
Linda and Karen, you're the last team to arrive.
Yeah, I kind of figured that.
The good news is, this is the first of 4 predetermined non-elimination legs, and you're both still in the race.
Oh, right. Non-elimination legs. The Amazing Race has those. You see, to keep things unpredictable, some legs of the race are non-elimination points, where the team that comes in last actually doesn't go home. Though this season marked the first time where there was actually a punishment for coming last in these legs.
The bad news is, there's a new twist in this race. I need you to empty out your pockets and your wallet and give me all your money.
So, the moms came in last, Linda had a twisted ankle, and now they had to come back from behind while begging strangers for money in Egypt. It wasn't looking good. If this were any other leg, the moms would already be gone and nobody would be surprised. But situations like this are what makes teams memorable. See, by this point, the moms weren't surprising anybody with their race skills, but they were winning everyone's hearts over by just being really fun and funny.
That's okay, we're going over to United now. And
They will have a ticket for us.
They will have one there.
Wait, but all we have to do is hit one number. In roulette? What are your chances of hitting?
Weird, I'm the big chicken. I got Karen to go first because if she went first, I could see how it's done.
That's why you got a helmet on. Glove! I mean the glove!
We have stuff like that in America.
Yes.
Where? We don't have that in Palmdale.
Not Palmdale.
Let's open one.
Charlotte and Myrna are at a great disadvantage.
And they're kicking our butts.
Okay.
You forgot my middle name's Mario Andretti.
Linda is so vivacious. The fun that she has is contagious.
When many teams were fighting or being super intense or talking shit to each other, the moms were laughing along, making fun of all the misfortunes and cruising on pure optimism. It made them very likable and easy to root for. Plus, they had this really cool outfit that became synonymous with them and which made them instantly recognizable. The Bowling Mom shirts are one of the first instances of an outfit being iconic in this race, along with the Guido's yellow shirts combination. But also along with the Guidos, the moms became one of the first teams to actually gain a nickname of their own, which was the Bowling Moms. So they may have not done it on purpose, but they created this instantly identifiable image around them. And they were associated with their own unique shirts their own team nickname, and along with how fun it was to see them race, the Bowling Moms had become very easy to like and remember. Listen, there hadn't been any Bowling Moms before, and there hasn't been any Bowling Moms since. There have been Roller Moms, but Linda and Karen will always be the Bowling Moms. Still, their name had a ways to go before it became an erasable part of race history. And still, they had a lot to overcome. Mainly, Colin. Colin and Christy started the race in pretty shaky form, but by leg 5 they were far and away the best and most dangerous team of the season. I mean, in the same leg that Linda and Karen were supposed to be eliminated, Colin and Christy came in first place. With a 7-hour lead. A 7-hour lead was unheard of halfway through a race, and it could have been much more if it weren't for equalizers. Colin and Christy were showing that physical prowess wasn't the only way to dominate the race, as they would often collude with other teams to buy the best tickets and also persuade them to let him have the earliest flights, as Colin was seen as the leader of the pack and deserving of going ahead first.
One team can go earlier than the rest of the teams. We have no problem with them going. They bought us the tickets for the bus. Are you in agreement?
Yeah, Colin was a mastermind. This, along with a dash of good luck in the airport and a fast forward, allowed Colin and Christy to gain an enormous lead on the others and to cruise through the middle portion of the race without having to worry an inch about getting last. And all of this while the Bowling Moms had to overcome a bunch of obstacles to even get to keep racing. Thankfully, the race was prepared with equalizers that made sure that Colin didn't have that big of a lead, and by the next leg every team was already kind of on the same ground. So having said that, I think that's the perfect spot for a new stage of the race. A middle portion of the competition that would be a tricky road for the Bowling Moms. They not only have to claw out of last place, but also be able to compete with Colin at his peak. So, will they be able to do it? No. I think this next portion shows a clear difference between Linda and Karen's abilities compared to Colin and Christy's. I mean, this is Colin and Christy for the next bunch of legs.
Colin and Christy, you're team number 1. You're team number 2. You're team number 1. Team number 1. Team number 1. 1.
The couple were dominating the race like we had never seen before. They seemed to be able to do everything, go anywhere, and navigate any barrier that was present in their way. Even when they had some major mishaps like Colin's taxi blowing a tire or almost getting arrested for fighting a cab driver, they still managed to end up in second. Literally nothing was stopping this team. So while Colin and Christy were tearing up the course, on the opposite side the Bowling Moms were just fucking surviving.
I just want to get out of here.
By the power of pure comedy.
Hopefully we will arrive a half an hour before the other teams.
It's a gamble. Behind the pack again. Seems like it's the story of our life.
We're cutting it very close right now. Plane leaves at 11:30. The driver just said we're 15 minutes from the airport.
Airport only for the terminal.
Oh my God, no way.
This is the new airport.
We told them we wanted to go to the old port.
They're still here, Karen, I think. No way. Hurry up, hurry up. Go fast, we have to go fast.
That flight should have been at least taxiing away.
I gave him $5 and he says, no, you owe me $45 million.
41 dirhams. 15.
All right. It ends up instead of $40, which was all our money, he wanted $15. I said, thank you, ma'am. And walked away.
Oh my god, when I tell you what the Bowling Moms went through after they were non-eliminated, you'd think that this was some sort of top-tier comedy flick. And when I tell you that, despite all the hilarious mishaps, they kept surviving leg after leg after leg by the skin of their teeth due to incredibly unlikely circumstances. To be honest, I don't remember the moms getting so lucky here, but I also didn't remember them getting so unlucky. Like, let's take a look at what they went through. In leg 6, after they were spared from elimination, they got all their money and possessions taken away, so they had to beg for money in Egypt and hope that they get enough to pay the taxis so they can even continue trying to get out of last place.
Look. Oh, Rod, this is the mother load.
And the thing is, they actually did it. They actually caught up and they were doing fine.
Right now, Karen and I are on a high. We're back in it. It's square one.
But in this episode, the last challenge before the pit stop was one that completely relied on luck. And wouldn't you imagine, the bowling moms had the worst luck of all the competing teams.
Karen, I can't believe this. I'm so mad. I quit. Karen, I am trying so hard.
They spent so much time in there. You can even see how much Linda dug through the sand to find that darn beetle they were looking for. And it's one of the few times where Linda actually loses her cool.
You're supposed to be the lucky one.
I just couldn't find it. I was getting very tired.
However, the key word is of all the competing teams. Because, to their luck, this is the episode where Marshall couldn't get to keep racing due to the immense pain in his knees, and where the team of brothers decide to quit the race.
So we know at this point that the amount of pain that he's in, Marshall couldn't do it. Game over, we've lost.
So, technically the bowling moms always had a safety cushion, and they were able to survive the punishment. And then we get to leg 7 in Tanzania, which actually is pretty good for the moms. I mean, they still have to climb back from the bottom, and they are the last to arrive to the next destination, but to their luck, they're pretty much the only team that doesn't suffer from any kind of mishap in this leg. Like the models and the twins get scammed by their taxi drivers and get stuck on the road with no gas, Colin has to repeat the egg challenge over and over again, Chip and King get detoured by a guy trying to sell them pillows they don't need, and the cousins had the disadvantage of Charla, a dwarf woman, having to run in a leg that was almost entirely dependent on feet speed. So the moms got a pretty respectable third place, while Charla and Myrna got eliminated.
Sorry to tell you, you've both been eliminated from the race.
Thank you for...
But if you think Tanzania is being good to them, oh god, be prepared, because this is where things get ridiculous. Okay, so the bowling moms start in third, pretty good. But it gets even better when Colin and Christy hire a cab that ends up popping a tire halfway through the airport, and Linda and Karen pass them to get to second place.
We just passed Colin and Christy.
Well, not long after Colin and Christy pop their tire, the mom's taxi runs out of oil.
Our car started making a funny noise. He's checking the oil in his car. You have oil?
Great.
In the middle of a dirt road, in complete darkness, ways away from any gas station or store that could help them. That is pretty much the worst case scenario for any team in any foreign country. Their cab driver even has to call someone else to bring them a new taxi. And this, of course, allows every team to pass the bowling moms, and by the time they resolve their issue, they are dead last.
We're last again.
And as if things could get any worse, they miss the flight that everyone else is taking and have to take a separate flight that departs hours apart.
Please, please. Oh, please. You do it? Oh, please.
We're gonna be about 5 hours behind.
Seems like we're always going to last and having to catch up. I'm upset.
This is a death knell in the race. When you take a plane that arrives hours after every other team lands, there's almost no shot. You're eliminated unless something really lucky happens. Something really lucky happened.
Hours of operation are from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Oh my gosh, it was so great! Back in it, the moms are back in it.
Yeah, equalizers, they saved the day again. These are put into place to keep teams within a considerable distance of each other, and so we don't have a situation where a team is a full day ahead of everyone else, which makes them saviors to any team that is on the bottom. The show doesn't really care if a team reaches 8 hours before another, they really don't keep track of the times and stuff like that, and they don't make teams wait out a timer, so the equalizers are basically a restarting point, where every team is on the same ground again. And it just so happened that, after the bowling moms had the worst luck of their lives, surely to get eliminated, everything gets completely offset by the luckiest of equalizers. And after this, they have a new life in the race. This stretch of the race for the moms is such a comedy of errors, misfortunes, and miracles that is very rarely seen in The Amazing Race, and having them survive all this BS while being their happy but deprecating selves made them so endearing for many. You could see that many times they lost hope and accepted their fate, only for them to burst out laughing when they found out that somehow, despite everything they went through, they were still in the race. It's at this point that I think that they really cemented themselves as huge fan favorites, What with all the shenanigans they just went through and their incredibly funny reactions to everything, it's easy to love teams like that. But there's also something called the underdog factor. If The Amazing Race has one big flaw, it would be that it's usually a fairly predictable show. By the midpoint of any season, you can usually tell who's going to go to the finale and who is going to go far and who will win, most likely. Of the 35 seasons of The Amazing Race, I'd say like only 2 of them had truly super unlikely winners, and like 3 more who were kinda surprising and sort of unexpected. And even if here in The Amazing Race 5 there was a wider variety of teams, it still had its frontrunners. Colin and Christy were the top dogs, of course, and Brandon and Nicole were also very consistent, and Chip and Kim were sloppy but also had the capacity to match up to the top contenders. Meanwhile, the twins and the bowling moms had the lowest odds of anyone to win, and at this point I think they were the only teams left to not win a leg. And in a show that can be so devoid of surprises, people like myself will always root for the most unlikely outcome. That is the most fun. I love rooting for teams that I think have some of the lowest chances of winning, because those teams winning is the outcome that absolutely no one expects. And the greatest moments in reality television history come from the unexpected. Even if they didn't win, I just wanted them to get to the finale. It was already a miracle that they had survived this far, but since they're here, why not? Why not believe that they can pull it off again and have the chance to race for the million? People wanted more of them, I wanted more of them, and their shenanigans and their jokes. They wanted the most unlikely run ever to continue as long as it could because, well, when are we ever gonna have something like the Bowling Moms again? In a competition that depends so much on fitness and agility. It's time to let their legend continue. Though for some people, this was less about the Bowling Monks doing well and more about hoping that Colin would fail. You see, for the underdogs to have a chance, it would mean that the top runners will have to fall from their throne. It's a tale as old as time, the David and Goliath story of the minnows beating the giants, but in this case, it was something more than that. People not only wanted Colin to be defeated, they wanted him to be humbled.
When I look around at the size of the competition, I'm confident we're going to be the team that wins.
And I feel confident that there's no other team that's stronger than us. I think both of us are very intelligent. Some of these other teams make a lot of stupid mistakes.
It would be one thing if Colin was modest about his dominance and people just wanted to avoid a predictable season. But Colin was built different. He said it in his own words.
I think that I could possibly be the most intense person that's ever run this race.
And he meant that. He constantly bragged about how he was the strongest racer of the bunch. He constantly undermined everyone else's abilities because, in his mind, there was no one that could match him. He reveled in being the boss of the pack and getting advantages due to his leadership, and he got into explosive arguments with friend taxi drivers. He was so full of himself. But what made him so annoying for many was that he was right. It'd be funny if he bragged about being the best and constantly fell on his face, but instead everyone became exasperated at the fact that Colin was always on the top. Very few people can tolerate a smartass like Colin, but even fewer can stand one that is actually being proven right. This cockiness is what made the moments where he got flustered so much more satisfying, though he always managed to overcome it by the end. What people really wanted is for him to fall, and to fall hard. To finally have that blow up that sends him home and to see him fully and totally beaten. Not necessarily by the Bowling Moms, but if a pair of bumbling middle-aged ladies that don't know what they're doing manage to outlast the self-appointed smartest, most complete competitor of all time, wouldn't that be one of the funniest moments ever? That's what everyone was rooting for, as unlikely as it seemed. And then, one day, out of nowhere, the moms woke up. And the stage of the game where the pressure crushes the weakest, where teams have to be laser focused and precise, this is the moment where Linda and Karen decide to turn into muscled up beefcakes. Alright, I'm exaggerating, it's not like they suddenly dominate, but after going to 3 straight legs of barely surviving shenanigans, now they were suddenly matching the pace of the strongest teams of the season. They go to India and then they struggle a little bit and Linda kinda loses her cool again.
I don't want to miss it. Go to get money. Change 15. Will you do that?
Linda, we're gonna get in trouble. You can't be flashing that money around.
Go. Give fast to the bank. No! Stop the car! I don't want to go to the bank. Take me back. Go now. Please take me back.
Oh my God, Linda. Linda has just been whining, and I just want her to be quiet.
But they still end up in 3rd. Then they go to New Zealand, run the cleanest leg of their lives, even finish in 2nd.
You're team number 2.
We did it right this time.
Almost going head to head against Colin himself. But nothing comes close to what happened on the Philippines.
We've come in first the last 3 legs. That's because everybody else sucks.
Where is he going? No, in this field! Oh my God!
The Philippines leg of Amazing Race 5 is a legendary tale in reality television for many reasons. But I think the main thing on why it works so well is that this is basically the conclusion of both storylines that have been building up. This is where the Bowling Moms finally beat Colin at his prime. It's the penultimate episode of The Amazing Race 5 and it's do or die for the remaining 4 teams, where all the gloves come off and everyone is on its own. May the best team win. Wait, wasn't it like this before? Not exactly. Listen, while the Mom and the twins may not have been the greatest of racers, there was another reason why they constantly found themselves at the bottom, and that was because of Colin and Christy. Colin and Christy very smartly made an alliance very early on with both Chip and Kim and Brandon and Nicole, in which they constantly help each other with transportation and travel and sometimes even challenges, so they were always relatively safe until the end. The Bowling Moms were left out of this because 1. They were seen as a weak team, and 2. They were friends with Charlie and Myrna, who Colin and Christy deeply hated.
There is a Myrna camp and a Colin camp, and really it's like the clash of the titans. They can't stand each other.
I wanted to ensure that Myrna and Smyrna would not be on the same bus as us.
You hate us! Like, I feel like I'm back in junior high, having bullies try to put me down. They disgust me. These people are maniacs. Majnoul, Hadol Majnoul.
Gain too much, and I know Colin and Christy are good, but damn it, Charlotte and Myrna are better. I love them.
So they never had the benefit of being in a mutual working group for as long as these 3 teams did. Yeah, the Moms had to fight against a lot more than just competent teams. They also had to fight friendship. But now that everyone's so close to the million, teams were savvy enough to know that they couldn't let Colin get to the end. He's already won 5 legs, he's already dominated the race like no other, he's capable of getting 3 steps ahead of everyone and they wouldn't even know it. So it was important for all the teams that they don't get to that final. And the team that knew this more than anyone were Chip and Kim, who were Colin and Christy's closest allies.
Chip and Kim are great. I feel like we can trust Chip and Kim more than we can the other teams. We can help each other get into the top 3.
Chip and I want Colin and Christy to self-destruct.
When he's frustrated, we actually end up making mistakes, and it could definitely hurt us in the race.
We have to make Colin overconfident so he'll try to impress the rest of the competitors and Christy so he'll make a mistake.
Chip had actually been devising something to get into Colin's head for a while, but never had time to execute it because, well, Colin was always so far ahead. However, the Philippines presented a golden opportunity. They were traveling to a new country, everyone was taking the same flight, all the teams were leveled, and to top it off, ahead of them was the Yield.
The team that uses it may force a team that's behind them to stop racing for a predetermined amount of time. Any team that's being forced to yield must turn this hourglass upside down and wait for all the sand to run out before they continue on.
And in this case, Chip and Kim wanted to yield Colin and Christy. not only to slow them down, but also to mess with Colin's psyche by betraying him.
What are we gonna do?
You, Colin, and Christy.
Colin and Christy are like the Los Angeles Lakers. They are the best.
Kneel them. Colin and Christy, kneel them.
The only thing they had to do was reach the yield board before Colin did, but the only way to go there was to take a cab. However, as if even the race gods themselves wanted Colin to suffer, he and Christy got an abysmal taxi, meaning that when Chip reached the yield, the plan was in place.
Kneel them. Colin and Christy, are they here yet? I don't think they're here. Okay, I'm going to yield Colin and Christy.
We gotta put our little picture up there.
And when Colin arrived to see their faces put on the board, it went as well as you'd expect.
Oh my God!
They yelled at us, Colin.
Chip and count. Damn it!
This whole scene is hilarious. Watching the teams performing the challenge while Colin stands there with an intensely menacing stare, I know it got everyone nervous. And the challenge itself is also a highlight. I mean, teams have to put together and decorate a jeepney in the correct way, which, okay, isn't especially exciting, but the notable thing about it is that this is the only task in the whole race that the Bowling Moms win.
I'm like, dang!
We are in first place!
Thanks to them knowing how to put stuff together for their kids, Linda and Karen actually come out ahead in a challenge for once, and at the final four, as if the pyramids of Egypt were inverted, the Bowling Moms are now leading the pack while Colin and Christy are playing catch up. And the rest of the leg is the top 3 teams trying to desperately keep that 15-minute advantage they have over the race madman himself. What a funny turn of events. And it should be so intense. When it's Colin that you're racing against, there's always a feeling that he'll be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat and come back out of nowhere. Though this time it felt different. Chip's plan had actually worked, and Colin, feeling betrayed and angry, couldn't get in the right headspace to do the challenges as efficiently as he had done before.
Chip and Kim completely backstabbed us. I would just love it if we were able to pass him and he got eliminated.
Which culminated in the legendary Broken Ox meltdown.
Whoa! Whoa! Stupid ox! No! Stay in the field! Where's he going? No, in this field! Oh my God! My ox is broken! This is bull!
It's a moment full of so many memorable soundbites that have persisted in the reality TV online space and which cemented Colin as an all-time great character in reality TV history. However, that meltdown pretty much cemented him as a bottom for the leg, meaning that for the finale, we would have no more hilarious Colin shenanigans, and that the moms, who couldn't win the leg but at least came in second place, finally beat Colin at the race, and they would have the shot at $1 million for the finale. But then, this whole video wouldn't make sense, would it? The moms had nothing to do with Colin's downfall. It was just Chip, and they just went to the finale and didn't win, but they just made everyone proud? That's pretty anticlimactic. I mean, how did that change the Amazing Race in any way? There has to be something more.
Pleased to tell you, however, this is the last of 4 predetermined non-elimination legs. Right. That's right. And you are still in the race.
I love you, baby.
Yep. The same thing that kept the Bowling Moms' hopes alive had also spared the lives of their biggest threats and stopped them from getting to the finale. I mean, they could still make it, but the moms would have to withstand the ire of an incredibly incensed Colin. Maybe the moms wouldn't get the brunt of the blame, but they were still the most likely to be beaten by Colin if he did well. And they had already come so far, there's no way they will let themselves be beaten, not even by the show's fiercest competitor. So, with everything said, it's time for... It's now or never for the Bowling Moms. It's the last hurdle they had to jump for them to complete the biggest upset in Amazing Race history. and to truly show that the race can be for everyone and anyone. Although by this point they had already gained a solid legacy. With the twins' elimination, Linda and Karen became the only female team to reach the Final Four and also to make it to the final episode, a distinction that they would hold until season 10. It's an incredible feat. I mean, the funny moms that no one believed in became the best performing women team of all time, and a clear example that even if the race gets advantage to the strong, sheer determination, smart decisions, and a good attitude can carry you far. Still, having muscle will always trump a good state of mind. And also, luck. A lot of luck. And there's no better way to show this than the first 10 minutes of the finale. I mean, even when the bowling moms started 20 minutes in front of Colin and Christy, it only took the lack of getting a taxi for Colin and Christy to catch up and level up with the moms. So now, it became a brand new race. And I meant that. I mean, now they're all so bunched up together that any mistake can take anyone out for good. And still, the bowling moms found themselves trailing the 3 strongest teams of the season, and with how physically demanding we know the amazing race to be, it seemed unlikely that they would ever catch up to any of them. However, the upcoming challenge has an interesting setup, and it's here where the bowling moms pull one of the savviest moves we've ever seen by any team at this point. Okay, here's the challenge. Teams are in the middle of the sea and there are 3 islands that they can visit. Each island has a different flag on it and they must choose the one that has the flag of the Philippines. The problem is that neither Colin or Christy nor the bowling moms knew what the flag looked like, so this challenge now became a game of chance. Or so it looked like, because this is where the moms pull an interesting strategy that not even Colin could conjure. Okay, so both teams were racing for left, right? And the bowling moms were directly level with Colin and Christy. With neither team knowing what island they had to go to, they could have left it up to luck and went to separate islands and see who gets it right. Though, with 3 choices, the bowling moms couldn't afford to lose sight of Colin and Christy. If Colin got it right the first time and the moms didn't, that would be like an instant game over. And it was unlikely that Colin, who has been very confident in his decisions, would choose the wrong island. So when Colin decided to visit this island first, the moms decided to follow them just in case. But it wasn't the right island, which means now the situation changes. There are 2 islands left that they could go to, and now it's a 50-50. The moms realized that no matter what they did, if they followed Colin, they would be giving him the upper hand because he would still be in the lead. And if he was right or wrong didn't matter because the moms would still be trailing him. So knowing this was an all or nothing situation, where Colin went to his second option, the moms decided to just go the other way.
What the hell? Will either lose or will win?
The bowling moms went the other way. I figured they probably think that they need to take a chance.
In the off chance that Colin got it wrong, then that would mean that the moms would take the lead back from Colin and have a 20-minute advantage over them, meaning this was the only option. And sure, well, here we can be like, oh that's the obvious choice. You'd be surprised how many teams wouldn't make it and would rather stay with the safety of knowing where Colin was. I mean, actually, it's Colin who should have realized that following the moms was the best move instead of going his own way. That way, Colin would always be in striking distance of the bowling moms and he could easily outrun them. It was a great risk for Linda and Karen to go to the other island in this situation, especially when it truly was a $1 million decision. And the only question left was, does it pay off?
Congratulations, you found the right island.
Damn it. This isn't it. Now we're in trouble.
Yes, they did it! I mean, it paid off and now they had a golden opportunity for the biggest upset of all time. Now's the chance, and they knew. They hurried through the remaining tasks while Colin seemed to be crumbling yet again under the pressure of making the wrong choice. The moms did every part as fast as they could until they reached the very final roadblock that would give them the chance to advance to the finale. And in that roadblock was a rock. Oh no. You know how I said that muscle will trump anything most of the time? There's no better way to show that than to take a look at this. The teams in the final leg would be decided by the very final task, a wall ascension. It's not a rock climb, it's not rappelling up a mountain, it's not trekking up a path. The teams literally have to lift their bodies up by doing crunches repeatedly, which, as you can imagine, it's very difficult and very tiring to do, especially if you have a heavier body and not a lot of muscle. We even saw Chip struggle a lot trying to get himself off the wall, even with all the muscle he has, and we also saw how easily Brandon passed him because of his lighter physique. We could see it coming as soon as he showed up, that the moms would fail at the very last hurdle, and all the time they had gained on Colin and Christy would be lost because Colin would tear up the challenge quick. After all, not only was he strong, he was furious. And yeah, lo and behold, Karen tried as hard as she could to get up that wall, with Linda cheering her on and pushing her to go further, but try as she might, her body was just not capable of this. This is purely upper body exercise. It was clear that the bowling moms would not be able to ace it. And once Colin arrived, I think it was over. He quickly put on the gear, he kept doing constant moderate crunches, and passed Karen in like no time. Meaning that once again, the moms, who had gone through so much in this race, found themselves in last, and sadly, this time it would be for good.
Brendan, Karen, you're the last team to arrive.
We figured it. We did great.
Sorry to tell you, you've both been eliminated from the race.
Yeah.
And now you left one standing today.
That's me. No way. I could not even make it up that thing. Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare.
And all of this felt so unfair. I wasn't there, but I imagine this had to feel like the most bullshit elimination the race had ever seen. For the bowling moms run to end because of an overtly physical challenge after they had outsmarted and unlocked Colin and Christy, that felt so disappointing. I mean, it's a total anticlimax. And some might say, what's the problem with the challenge? If the bowling moms wanted to win, they would have beat it. Only the strongest teams come out on top. They didn't deserve to be in the finale. The thing is, The Amazing Race likes to market itself as a show where anything can happen, where anyone can win it. And that's why they always cast teams of old couples or grandparents, jicky guys and girls. So it's a pretty discouraging thing to see that teams with muscle will always be the most favored. After all, there's a reason why 7 of the first 8 winners were muscle guys. But the bowling moms weren't very good anyways and weren't going to win. This way, the finale is actually competitive. Who says? Who knows? The bowling moms would have been there, competing for it, and seeing how the finale was not very physically taxing, they would have stood a chance. And besides, the bowling moms are not the only team that this happens to. This also happens to strong women teams in shows like this. The most glaring example is Renata and Ana Paula from the 4th season of The Amazing Race Latin America. You probably never heard of them, but they are one of the best women teams of all times in any franchise. They could ace every challenge, they work together like a machine, they navigated swiftly, and they continuously kicked ass to win 6 legs. They were on top for like half the race, so they were more than capable and deserving of winning. However, one of the last legs was thoroughly focused on upper body strength, including building a raft, rowing, and lifting some giant heaviest logs for no reason. And you know who could do the challenge? The 3 pairs of brawny men still in the race. And you know who couldn't? The kick-ass girls who just naturally didn't have the brute strength to lift the trunks. And so they were forced to quit the challenge and they were eliminated shortly after. And it's like, come on, what else did they have to do? It was just very disheartening to see a team like the Bowling Moms be so close to upsetting the status quo and proving that anyone could really compete to win, only for the harsh realities of the unbalanced nature of the show to crush their hopes for good. Whatever, I'm making all this noise for a little unfair challenge, but to tell you the truth, that's not what upsets me the most. I'm not mad at the challenge. I'm mad that it was Colin who did it. Why? Because he had done the previous challenge, and the previous one, and the previous one, and the previous one, and the previous one. Everything. He did everything. If the race is supposed to be about who's got the best overall team, why is Colin the only one doing the tasks? Well, it's all because of a little production oversight, which had actually been impacting a number of things in the show so far. I think it's time to talk about the roadblocks. Roadblocks are challenges that only one team member can perform, and they must decide who does it based on a big question related to the assignment. There's usually one per episode, and it's a neat way to test the team's decision skills and determine whose team is actually the most evenly balanced. The thing is, in the early seasons, the teams didn't have to make any decisions and teams were woefully unbalanced.
I feel bad. I don't do anything.
For some reason, the producers didn't think of limiting the number of roadblocks that a person could perform, meaning that the same person could theoretically do all the roadblocks and it would be allowed, which, as you can imagine, was incredibly overpowered. That meant that half the team would basically be irrelevant in most cases. Teams could have one strong guy doing all the roadblocks while the other one just stands there, damn if they could do the challenges or not. In fact, do you remember when I mentioned the team that had a strong guy who carried his best friend to the end? I wasn't trying to be mean to the girl, I literally meant that the guy did every single roadblock but one, while his friend literally wanted to give up because she became too tired. And even when the weaker person did a roadblock, it was usually one that had to do little with physicality and was more like eating or searching. This is the same exploit that was being pulled here, with Colin doing all but one roadblock, with the only one being a food challenge that Christy immensely struggled with. The thing is though, it wasn't just Colin and Christy pulling this off. Let's look at the other two teams. Chip also did every single roadblock, while Kim did only one, and it was a luck-based one. And much like Christy, Nicole also did the only eating task while Brandon performed in everything else. Literally, the three teams in this finale pulled the same hack.
It's a roadblock. That would be you.
Great.
Strong arms and strong legs. Is that you or is that you? Well?
All right, I'm doing it.
Let the men do all the work to carry them through the difficult challenges, all while Linda and Karen had to actually think hard about who did what, and had to match up to the male powerhouses while being older and much less strong. So, just to recap, let's go through everything that the moms had to battle against. Being part of an unfavored archetype, competing against the most intense racer of all time, a twisted ankle, being on a flight with hours of difference from the other teams, fights with foreigners, a cab that ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere, an alliance in which the strongest teams were helping each other, challenges that favored strength, a ridiculously upper body based final challenge, and an overpowered oversight in the rules that they couldn't exploit. All of this while remaining optimistic the whole way through, laughing at those misfortunes and making the best out of their experience at every turn. All of this is what made Linda and Karen the ultimate underdogs. This is what made the Bowling Mom shirts an iconic item of reality television. This is why they became an unforgettable chapter in Amazing Race history. This is why it was so important for many to have them upset Colin and Christy, a team that was much more favored and had plenty of advantages going into the race. This is why everyone hoped to see the moms in the finale to show that you didn't need to have a guy on a team to compete for the million. And ultimately this is why it was so heartbreaking to see them fall just short of the finale. All thanks to an exploit in the rules that all of the finalists used, and one which concretely showed how unfair this show was towards not only the women, but the older teams as well.
You guys bowled a lot of strikes on this race.
Yeah, we did.
And now you left one standing today.
That's me. No way. I could not even make it up that thing. Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare. We did it.
I wasn't there for the repercussions of this elimination, but I can envision that there was probably a massive audience outcry and discussions of the unbalanced nature of the show. I mean, even Linda and Karen pointed it out in one of their exit interviews, quoting, "I don't even think it's a matter of younger contestants. I think if you had a male on your team, you definitely had a little bit of an advantage." After all of the women did a heavy roadblock, The men said, "My gosh, we almost lost the race because we let the girls do one damn roadblock and then they never did another one. We're over 40 women and we did every single task, so I don't think it's the age, I think a lot of it is having a man on your team." However, I can imagine that something must have reached the production team because after this fiasco, they decided to patch the exploit by creating a new rule regarding the roadblocks for the very next season, the roadblock rule. Now, each team member can only perform up to 6 roadblocks per race until the final leg. They can be distributed in any way they want, but the team's roadblocks must be evenly split coming into the finale. I honestly don't get what took them so long to limit the number of roadblocks per season. I imagine they didn't think teams would appoint only one person to every one they had, but this change was sorely needed. Now the contestants being teams actually mattered, and now they had to carefully and strategically think about when to use or save a roadblock in case a hard challenge comes up ahead. Decent teams have been screwed over on roadblocks trying to save the muscle for later, and in my opinion, that's much more fair and much more fun. If both people in a team can't perform at the same level, then they weren't actually the best pair, right? Besides, it also shined a spotlight to women in co-ed teams, who now had a chance to prove that they could kick as much ass as their partners, leading to a much fairer and better reception in dating couples who went far into the race. Now, production has never outright said that this rule was due to the Bowling Moms elimination, and the official name of it is just the roadblock rule, but nevertheless, it became obvious to fans that Linda and Karen's exit had left an undeniable impact on the franchise, leading the show to revamp the rules of one of its main components and changing the show in a drastic way. The race format that the Bowling Moms competed in is not the same format that we have today, and the 6 roadblock rule became something that even international versions adopted, and it's all due to 2 middle-aged ladies that gave the show's most competent racer one hell of a fight. Thus, many fans refer to this new roadblock rule as the Bowling Moms rule, honoring one of the greatest underdog teams that the race ever had. As for the Bowling Moms, they instantly became icons of the race, and they knew of their popularity too. I mean, Linda ran a vlog detailing her thoughts on every season up to Amazing Race 9, and was aware of how much the audience loved hearing from them. Despite this, they were never asked back to race again, and by this point, the window, I imagine, has fully closed. Though, even with the Amazing Race's popularity draining continuously over the years, Linda and Karen have always been loved by the reality TV audience, as their carefree attitude and story of perseverance touched the hearts of many young watchers that loved rooting for them through their journey. The Bowling Moms were the most unlikely game changers that the Amazing Race has ever seen, and now they have a rule to ensure those unique bowling shirts will never go out of style. I'm the Reality 9 again, and hey.
Strike!
My baby and me, oh gee,